When a squad of officers swarmed her front porch, pounding on the door with shouts of authority, Nia Carter felt the familiar sting of fear. But this time, she knew her rights cold. In a tense standoff, she turned their attempted raid into a masterclass in the law. The first thing Nia Carter noticed was the sound. Not the usual light tap from a neighbor or the muffled thud of a delivery driver dropping off a package, but a deep, pounding knock that rattled her front door as though someone wanted to shake it off its hinges. She froze mid-step in her kitchen, one hand still holding a steaming mug of green tea, and listened. The pounding came again, harder, sharper this time, accompanied by a voice shouting from the other side, "Police! Open the door!" The sound triggered a flood of memories she thought she had long buried, scenes from her childhood in the East Side, where raids were as common as birthday parties, and the sudden scream of "police" was often the prelude to chaos. She remembered standing at the top of a staircase when she was 10, peering down as officers in tactical gear pushed past her crying mother, barking orders no one dared question. That was the day she learned that uniforms could bring fear as quickly as they brought supposed protection. Now, more than 2 decades later, that same primal fear gripped her chest, but it didn't control her the way it used to. She wasn't a scared little girl anymore. She was a 34-year-old woman, a homeowner, and, most importantly, someone who had spent years absorbing every bit of legal knowledge she could from the paralegal courses she took and the community legal aid workshops she volunteered for. The pounding grew louder. "Open up, police, we have a warrant!" The voice was commanding, but there was something in its tone, an edge, almost as if the speaker expected resistance and was already angry about it. Nia set her mug down on the counter, her fingers steady even though her pulse was climbing. She walked toward the front of the house, her soft slippers whispering across the hardwood, and positioned herself just inside the foyer, behind the solid oak door she had reinforced with a steel frame when she first bought the place. She did not reach for the lock. Instead, she called out, "Slide the warrant under the door." She heard a pause outside, a shift in footsteps, and then the voice again. "Ma'am, just open the door so we can talk." "No," she said firmly. "If you have a warrant, put it under the door so I can read it." Her voice was calm, level, the way her legal aid mentor had taught her. She knew that tone was critical, polite enough not to escalate, but unwavering in asserting her rights. From the other side came another voice, deeper, irritated. "Ma'am, if you don't open this door right now, we will break it down." Her stomach tightened, but she did not flinch. She remembered the Fourth Amendment, word for word, the way she'd practiced it in front of her bathroom mirror. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated. She took a slow breath. "If you have a signed search warrant issued by a judge, you can slide it under the door and I will read it. If you don't, you are not entering my home." There was another pause, followed by a mumbled exchange between at least 2 officers. She could make out fragments. "Probable cause," and "she's stalling," but nothing that suggested they had the paperwork she demanded. Nia reached for her phone on the console table beside the door and opened her video recorder. She angled it toward the peephole, capturing their movements outside, and narrated in a clear voice. "This is Nia Carter. It is," she glanced at her phone screen, 8:07 a.m., and there are at least 4 police officers outside my door claiming to have a warrant. They have not provided it. I am invoking my rights under the Fourth Amendment." She knew that if anything happened next, there would be a record, one they couldn't twist later. A sharp metallic sound made her glance at the peephole. One officer was holding a folded piece of paper toward the glass, too far away for her to read. "Here, we have it," he shouted. "Slide it under the door," she repeated. The officer hesitated, then pulled the paper back and spoke to someone out of view. A different voice took over, this one smoother, more deliberate. "Ms. Carter, we're investigating a very serious matter. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." "The law doesn't have a hard way," she replied. "It has a legal way. Follow it." She could feel the tension rising outside, like static before a storm. In her mind, she went over the steps she'd learned. Don't open the door. Don't consent to a search. Demand the warrant. Call a lawyer. She tapped her attorney's contact, putting the call on speaker. "Angela Morris," came the crisp voice after 2 rings. "Angela, it's Naya. I have police at my door claiming they have a warrant, but they haven't provided it. You're on speaker and they can hear you." Angela didn't miss a beat. "Officers, this is attorney Angela Morris representing Ms. Carter. You are required by law to present a valid signed search warrant before entering her property. If you have one, slide it under the door immediately." Silence. A cough. Then one officer muttered, "We don't have to do that." "Yes, you do," Angela cut in, her voice like steel. "Unless you are responding to an exigent circumstance, imminent danger to life, or the destruction of evidence, you cannot enter without consent or a valid warrant. This conversation is being recorded." Nia watched through the peephole as one of the officers glanced over his shoulder toward the street. A small group of neighbors had begun to gather, some with phones raised. The sight gave her a flicker of confidence. Witnesses mattered. She could hear the officers muttering again. One seemed frustrated. "We can get the warrant signed, but—" "Then go get it," Angela said, still calm, still firm. "And until you do, leave my client's property." Nia didn't say anything, just kept filming, her phone steady in her hand. She was aware of every beat of her heart, the air thick in her lungs, but her resolve never wavered. She had been preparing for this moment for years without realizing it. Every community meeting, every story of a wrongful raid, every scrap of legal advice she'd taken to heart was now her armor. The standoff continued, and though they didn't step back yet, they hadn't moved forward either. Outside, the hum of voices from the sidewalk grew louder, the energy shifting. And Nia knew that the longer she stood her ground, the more the balance of power was tilting in her favor. The man who seemed to be in charge stepped closer to the door, his boots grinding against the porch boards with a weight that felt intentional. Through the peephole, Nia could see his jaw was set tight, his eyes flicking between her door and the small but growing group of neighbors recording from the sidewalk. "Ms. Carter," he began, his voice slow, deliberate, the kind of tone meant to sound reasonable, but designed to wear a person down. "We are investigating an urgent matter. We have reason to believe evidence connected to a felony is inside this home. If you cooperate now, this will go quickly." Nia didn't hesitate. "If you have reason to believe that, then you should have already taken your evidence to a judge and gotten a signed warrant. Show me that signed warrant and I'll read it." She could see him tighten his grip on the folder in his hand. He flipped it open, pulling out a sheet of paper, and began to read aloud. "This is a warrant issued for the search of—" But Naya stopped him mid-sentence, raising her voice so it carried through the door and over the murmur of the crowd outside. "Reading from a paper does not prove it's valid. I need to see it physically. I need to see the judge's signature, the date, the scope of the search. Slide it under the door." She felt her attorney's approval in the brief silence that followed. Angela's voice came steady through the speakerphone. "Officer, the law is clear. A warrant must be presented for inspection before it can be executed. Without it, you have no authority to enter. If you have a valid one, this should not be a problem." The officer's jaw ticked. He turned and muttered to another officer out of her line of sight. "It's not signed yet," she heard him say. The words landed like an electric charge in her chest, not from fear, but from vindication. They didn't have a valid warrant at all. What they were trying to do was bluff their way into her home, counting on intimidation and her possible ignorance of the law. Unfortunately for them, they had chosen the wrong person for that gamble. Nia straightened her back, her voice cutting clear through the thick air between them. "You just admitted you don't have a signed warrant. This conversation is being recorded. You are currently trespassing on my property." There was a ripple of reaction from the crowd outside, murmurs, a few gasps, the unmistakable click of more cameras being activated. The lead officer's eyes shifted toward the neighbors, clearly calculating the PR damage of this moment. Still, he didn't step back. Another officer, younger, stepped forward now, his expression less controlled. "If you're innocent, why won't you just let us in?" Nia almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because she had heard this line used in almost every Know Your Rights workshop she'd attended. "Because my innocence isn't the issue," she replied evenly. "The law is. Consent to a search is not required without a warrant. My refusal is not an admission of guilt. It's the exercise of a constitutional right. If you don't know that, then you should. The younger officer's mouth tightened, and he stepped back slightly. But the older one remained rooted in place. Angela's voice broke the moment. Ms. Carter, I recommend we escalate this properly. I'm calling the watch commander right now and notifying the civilian review board. Keep recording. Do not engage further unless they present paperwork. Nia nodded, keeping her phone trained on the porch. She could see the shift happening, subtle but real. The authority in their posture was starting to erode under the weight of public scrutiny and the cold reality that they were in dangerous legal territory. The murmuring from outside swelled, and she caught snippets. She's right. They can't just go in. No warrant? What are they doing here? Then, unexpectedly, one of the officers on the edge of the porch pulled out his phone and started typing. The lead officer shot him a look but didn't stop him. Nia suspected he was texting a superior, maybe trying to get last-minute authorization. Her instincts told her they were trying to find a way to salvage the situation without retreating in front of the growing audience. 10 minutes passed like that. 10 long minutes of a silent, invisible tug-of-war. Nia didn't move from her position by the door, didn't let her voice falter when she repeated her demands, and didn't stop filming for a second. The pressure outside was mounting, not just from the legal reality, but from the optics. A black woman standing in her own home, calm and resolute, refusing to let officers in without a warrant, with witnesses and video to back her up. This was not the visual the department wanted circulating online. Finally, the lead officer spoke again, but his tone had changed. It was quieter, more clipped. We can get the warrant signed within the hour. Then come back with it, Nia replied instantly. Until then, you're trespassing. The crowd murmured louder at that, and several phones were lifted higher. The officer's jaw worked, but he didn't argue. He turned and walked halfway down the porch steps, pulling out his radio. Nia couldn't make out what he was saying, but she knew she'd won this round. Still, she didn't relax. She kept her phone steady, her voice calm, her position unwavering. She knew enough to understand that they could try another angle, perhaps even invent an exigent circumstance to justify forcing their way in. But every passing second without action made that less likely. And then, just as the tension seemed to plateau, a new sound cut through the air. The low, distinct rumble of a heavier vehicle pulling up. Nia shifted her angle to the peephole just in time to see a black SUV with tinted windows stop in front of her house. The doors opened, and out stepped a man in a white shirt with gold insignia on the collar, the kind of uniform that didn't belong to a street officer. The crowd hushed slightly, sensing a shift in the balance. The man climbed the porch steps with measured, authoritative strides, speaking to the lead officer in low tones before turning toward Nia's door. Ms. Carter, I'm Captain Reeves, he said. I'd like to resolve this peacefully. His tone was calm, but she could hear the underlying calculation in it. This was someone weighing legal risk against departmental image. If you have a signed warrant, Captain, I'll read it, Nia said without missing a beat. There was a pause, and then, we don't have a signed one at this moment, but we have probable cause. Probable cause still requires judicial approval, she interrupted, her voice steady. If you're here without it, you're violating my rights. She heard Angela speak up sharply from the phone. Captain Reeves, I am Ms. Carter's attorney. Your officers have already admitted on record that there is no signed warrant. If you continue to remain on her property without one, you are opening this department to significant legal liability. Another pause, longer this time. The captain glanced toward the crowd, toward the phones capturing every word, then back at the lead officer. His lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word to Nia, he stepped down off the porch and conferred with the group. She couldn't hear the details, but the body language said enough. This was a retreat being debated in real time. Then, in a moment that felt almost surreal, she watched one of the officers set down the battering ram they had been holding since the beginning. It was like a signal to the rest. Shoulders loosened, radios clicked, and one by one, they began to step off her porch. The crowd's energy shifted from tense to quietly triumphant. Nia didn't cheer, didn't move, didn't open the door. She waited until the last uniform stepped onto the sidewalk before saying, This interaction is over unless you return with a valid, signed warrant. She ended the recording but saved the video immediately, uploading a copy to the cloud and sending another to Angela. The attorney's voice came through, calm but certain. They'll be gone soon, but this isn't over. We're filing a complaint, and I want you ready to give a full statement. Nia nodded, the adrenaline still rushing through her veins, but beneath it was something deeper, a quiet, powerful pride. She had stood her ground. She had done exactly what she was supposed to, and in doing so, she had not only protected herself, but had shown everyone watching exactly how to shut an unlawful raid down. The moment the captain gave the silent nod, the shift was unmistakable. The battering ram was carried back to the patrol van, radios crackled with clipped acknowledgments, and the porch that had felt like a siege platform just minutes earlier began to empty. Nia stayed right where she was, her back straight, her phone still in hand, recording every step of their withdrawal. She had no intention of breaking the protective barrier that her locked door provided, not until she saw the last uniformed figure cross the edge of her property line. The neighbors outside were murmuring now, the tension that had been strung so tight for nearly an hour finally loosening, but their phones stayed up, recording just like hers. Public accountability was a fragile thing. You didn't stop documenting until the threat was fully gone. When the final officer stepped onto the street and climbed into his vehicle, Nia exhaled slowly. She had been holding her breath for so long she hadn't realized how tight her chest felt. She glanced at the video clock on her phone. 47 minutes. That's how long they had tried to get into her home without the legal right to do so. 47 minutes that could have gone a very different way if she hadn't known the law cold. Angela's voice cut through her thoughts. They'll leave in under 2 minutes. Do not speak to them if they try one last time. Just keep the camera rolling. Sure enough, the captain lingered at the edge of the walkway, turning back toward the door as though he wanted to salvage the optics with some parting remark. Miss Carter, he called out, voice carrying across the yard, we'll be back with a warrant. His tone carried both promise and warning, but Nia didn't rise to it. She simply replied, when you do, I'll read it, and let the silence hang heavy between them. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned away, signaling to his team. When the last engine rumbled to life and the caravan pulled away, the crowd broke into quiet applause. It wasn't the kind of roaring cheer you'd hear at a rally, more the sound of collective relief and respect. A few neighbors approached the porch steps, asking if she was okay, offering to share their own videos. She thanked them without opening the door, explaining she'd take their contact info later. Angela was still on the line, already moving into legal triage mode. We're going to preserve every piece of evidence, she said. Your video, theirs if we can subpoena it, witness statements, timestamps. We'll file a complaint with Internal Affairs and the Civilian. Review board by tomorrow morning. This isn't just about you, Nia. It's about making sure they don't pull this stunt on someone who doesn't know better. For the next hour, Nia worked methodically, just as she would have in her paralegal office. She saved her videos to multiple encrypted drives, sent copies to Angela, and jotted down every detail she could remember. The sequence of voices, the exact phrases they used, even the look on the lead officer's face when she called out, their lack of a signature. These weren't just memories. They were evidence. By the time she finally stepped away from the door, her tea in the kitchen had gone cold, but she didn't touch it. The adrenaline was still coursing too hard through her veins. The news came faster than she expected. By early evening, her neighbor Malik had sent her a link to a video clip already circulating on social media. It was her, standing behind her locked door, her voice calm but unyielding as she demanded a signed warrant. The officers shifting uneasily outside. The caption read, "Know your rights. Watch this black woman shut down an illegal police raid." Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. The overwhelming tone was support. But there were the predictable detractors. 2, people insisting she must have had something to hide, that law-abiding citizens wouldn't resist. Nia didn't engage with any of them. She knew the truth. Innocence wasn't the issue. And rights didn't depend on whether you had something to hide. The next morning, she met Angela in person at the downtown legal office, handing over her notes and backup drives. They spent hours drafting the formal complaint, citing every relevant legal precedent. The officers had violated clear constitutional protections, attempting to execute a search without judicial approval, misrepresenting their authority, and remaining on private property after being told to leave. Angela added the state-specific statutes for trespass and unlawful detention, making sure the document was airtight. "They'll try to paint this as a misunderstanding," Angela warned, but the video and witness statements make that a very hard sell. Within a week, the complaint was filed. Local news picked up the story, running a segment that paired her video with expert commentary from a retired judge who confirmed what Nia already knew. Without a signed warrant or an exigent circumstance, the officers had no legal right to enter. "This is why knowledge matters," the judge said on camera. "Too often, citizens are pressured into giving up their rights because they don't know them. Ms. Carter knew hers, and she exercised them perfectly." The police department's official response was predictably vague. "We are reviewing the incident to determine whether proper procedures were followed." But unofficially, Angela's contacts within the legal community told her there was tension inside the department. Someone high up wasn't happy about the optics. 2 of the officers involved were quietly reassigned to desk duty pending the review. Nia didn't let the momentum stop there. She accepted an invitation to speak at the community center's monthly Know Your Rights seminar, standing in front of 50 people, neighbors, students, parents, and telling them exactly what happened. She walked them through the steps she took, the precise phrases she used, the traps to avoid. She emphasized how important it was to stay calm, to record everything, and to never, ever let intimidation replace the law. Afterward, a young woman approached her in tears, saying her brother had been arrested during a similar raid because he didn't know he could refuse entry. "You gave me the words I wish he'd had," she said. The viral clip didn't fade either. It crossed platforms, picked up by national accounts focused on civil liberties. An attorney from another state reached out to Angela, asking if they could use the video in a legal rights training. Nia agreed, on the condition that it be used for education, not profit. She had no interest in monetizing the incident. What mattered was that people learned from it. 2 months later, the Civilian Review Board issued its findings. The officers had acted outside the bounds of established legal procedure and had failed to present a valid signed search warrant prior to attempting entry. The board recommended additional training for all field officers on Fourth Amendment compliance. It wasn't the sweeping disciplinary action some might have wanted, but it was on record, a public acknowledgement that she had been right. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while Nia was tending to the small herb garden by her porch, a different patrol car slowed to a stop in front of her house. She tensed for a moment, but the officer inside simply gave a small nod before driving on. She didn't know if it was respect, acknowledgement, or something else entirely, but it felt like a turning of the page. That night, as the sun set and the street grew quiet again, Nia stood at her front door, the same door they had tried to breach, and rested her hand against its cool surface. In her other hand, she held a worn copy of the U.S. Constitution, the one she had kept on her bookshelf for years but never truly needed until that day. She thought about the 10-year-old girl who had watched helplessly as police tore through her family's home, and she thought about the woman she was now, who had stopped them cold with nothing but knowledge, calm, and the law. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe deeply, the air feeling just a little lighter. She locked the door, not out of fear, but out of habit, and for the quiet satisfaction of knowing it was her choice, and hers alone, to open it. In a world full of noise, we follow the quiet truth stories that reveal, awaken, and transform. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more untold narratives that challenge perception and stir the soul. Hit the bell so you never miss when the compass points us to the next hidden truth. This is Hidden Compass Stories, where every story leads somewhere deeper.